So today we are going to talk about serious issue, which is political correctness in magic and history. Now, let me explain what I define as a political correctness and what I define as influence of political correctness upon our observation of magic and history. So, broadly defined, imposing political correctness upon magic and history means that somebody projects our modern, early 21st century societal values upon cultures of the Bronze Age, of the Iron Age, of the Antiquity, and the late Classical period, where magical systems majority of us practice today in the Western magical tradition originated. And that's, I think, really bad, not only for the magical practice, but also for the authentic study of history and magical practices in general. Now, there are few topics which are widely influenced by what I consider and call political correctness, which I explained in this part of the video. There are first topics related to sacrifice and sacrificing, topics related to curses, and then also topic related to the quote-unquote free will of people upon whom magic is casted upon. And I will elaborate from the historical point of view all of the three issues and how political correctness influences our observation of those issues and why it is damaging to magical practice in general. So, first issue we should cover is issue of sacrifice and sacrificing. There is a modern assumption that old pre-Christian pagan religions didn't practice animal sacrifice, or that somehow old Indo-European, Semitic, Native American, or any other form of polytheism didn't include animal and let alone, God forbid, human sacrifice. And there is a pretty large group of people who advocate that that's the case and who also use that false claim to advocate for complete removal of even the most petty animal sacrifice in ritual practice. And that's absolute nonsense. First, if we examine all in the old Indo-European cultures, there is plenty of archaeological evidence for human sacrifice and of course for animal sacrifice. So from archaeological and historical point of view, such rites are definitely practiced. In Germanic polytheism, you had a bunch of lakes in which we can clearly find people who are at the bottom of those lakes, and by examining those bones we can see the evidence of ritual murder. There is also a bunch of evidence for sacrifice of infants in old Germanic and Celtic polytheism. There is archaeological evidence of infants being sacrificed in the roots of the sacred trees. Now, I will, in future videos of mine, link the sources to this. It will actually not be just my claims. I will make sure that I link the sources and link all kinds of articles you can read on the issue. But For the purpose of this video, I will quote Herodotus, who on multiple occasions quotes that Scythians, Gauls, and Thracians practiced human sacrifice. It was one of the key points he made about Thracian religion, and also about Scythian religion, and about old Celtic religion. There was also old Roman proverb. They used that proverb in order to terrify the children. Old Romans threatened their children that if they misbehave, Gauls will come and sacrifice them. Now, if you don't know, for the majority of the Roman history, Gauls actually inhabited the northern Italy, and there was a really serious war between the Gauls and the Romans for a long time over northern Italy. Of course, we know that Romans won the war at the end, and the Gauls in the northern Italy were Romanized, and it was one of the key reasons for the expansion of the Roman Empire. But essentially, I quoted those 2 or 3 sources. Also in Gallic Wars, Gaius Julius Caesar quotes that Gauls practice human sacrifice. There is also a claim by Herodotus in which Herodotus claims that Carthaginians sacrifice to Kronos as the chief of their pantheon. Now, from archaeology we know that Carthaginians venerated Baal Hamon as the chief of their pantheon, and Baal Hamon was probably the storm god, so he was not equivalent to Kronos. But what we can take from that analogy is that there was probably some form of human sacrifice there involved, because Kronos in Greek mythology is associated with human sacrifice, especially the sacrifice of infants. Now, people who want to oppose me can, counterclaim that all of those sources I stated, Herodotus, Gaius Julius Caesar, Roman folklore and proverbs, even the Bible, that all of those sources are biased. But then again, there is a lot of archaeological evidence, such as many of tomb-head excavations in the Middle East, in the Old Canaan, which have bones of the children mixed with bones of the animals in some form of a cremation pyre, and then ashes were put into those vessels from clay and then digged in some form of a religious place, in some form of a sacred ground. And those pots with those mix of infant and animal remains are known as the tomb-heads. So there is dozens and dozens, even hundreds of those tomb-heads found on the Middle East, in the area of Lebanon and Palestine specifically. And you have the Greek account, which I forgot to mention, that during the siege of Tyre, when Alexander the Great besieged the city of Tyre, the elders of Tyre started sacrificing to Baal Hadad children again. And that's actually a really interesting detail about the siege of Tyre. So there is a lot of textual and even archaeological evidence for human sacrifice in ancient cultures in a form of a religious and magical ritual. And the only reason why this is not discussed is simply because modern academics are not comfortable with the facts that ancient humans did it. And this is not the only issue which is not discussed, despite of the evidence that that thing existed. For example, you have a lot of evidence for some form of ritual castration in old Middle Eastern cultures and even in old Indo-European cultures. There is that concept of ritual castration, and we know from the Roman sources, from the pagan period, that the ritual castration was a part of a cult of Kybele or Kybele or Kybela, the mother goddess associated with the earth, venerated in what was then called the Asia Minor and what is now known as Turkey. So the reason why I am quoting all of those sources and all of those ancient accounts is to clarify that in ancient times humans definitely practiced animal sacrifice and human sacrifice. Now, I am not telling you to do those things if you disagree with them. I am simply telling you that it was the part of spiritual practice of the past. And there is no academic or practical reasons for us to deny it, if we really want to be honest. There is also another topic I wanted to cover in this video, which is the topic of curses. Well, let's be honest here. People always did it, and the threefold law of Wicca, which states that if you curse somebody, it will return to you 3 times, doesn't exist in any ancient source. It doesn't exist in any ancient grimoire. It doesn't exist in any folktale. It doesn't exist in any piece of the folklore recorded from even as recent as 19th century. So we can safely assume that the threefold law of the modern Wicca is not an ancient thing. It is purely a modern invention which wants to make magical practice more acceptable to the modern audience by imposing upon magical practice certain moral standards which are familiar with our Western observation of morality in the 21st century in order to attract the larger audience. And there is a third part, which is really, how I can say, prevalent in the modern occult community, which refers to somehow respecting the free will of the people you cast spell upon. Now, I am not encouraging you to cast spell against somebody's will if you think that's a wrong thing to do. What I am telling you is that there is no evidence in ancient sources that such a moral observation of magical techniques, which cares about free will on the individual upon which spell is casted, existed in ancient times. There is no such a moral conundrum within ancient witchcraft from the ancient sources we know. Quite the opposite. We have majority of ancient grimoires, magical writings, magical inscriptions, magical monuments which are erected for the purpose of magical rituals, which specifically are erected for manifesting certain goal which influences the will and the free will of somebody else. And let me give you the most blatant example. You have many survived ritual procedures which rulers and military generals used to secure victory in combat, to secure victory in war, to secure victory in battle. And do you really think that those people who had those ritual casted against, for example, I am a Roman commander and I call my priests to cast spells against the Gauls in order to win the battle against the Gauls, do you really think that those Gauls wanna lose? Do you really think that those Gauls wanna lose the battle if they are charging against me to kill my soldiers and to conquer my territory? Or to prevent me from conquering their territory, depending on the nature of the war? So, this entire moral conundrum is moral nonsense imposed on witchcraft in the present day, and we shouldn't really observe ancient sorcery in the constraints of that moral limitations we have right now. I am not calling you to use your magic against moral codes you have. I am simply telling you to not impose those moral limits you have upon the practice of people who lived a little bit more than 2 millennia before you did. Thanks for watching and see you next time.